Hello my creative critters and welcome to Sketching with Sarah. I'm Sarah and this week's video is gonna be another ceramic painting video where I'm gonna share my process painting this little gnome ring holder that I got from Color Me Mine. Usually I start any ceramic painting project by taking a photo of what I'm gonna be painting and plan out the colors that I want to use and where I want to use those colors on the piece and do all of that digitally, but I kind of wanted to go with the same color palette that I used when I painted my shelf hugger dragon ceramic piece and my other gnome mug. So with those colors, I chose where each color would go on this gnome, and I wrote in pencil the color number on each part of the piece. I use pencil because any mark in pencil will just burn off when it's fired in the kiln, so using pencil is perfect for the planning stages. I like planning the colors ahead of time because it just makes it more mindless and I can really focus on the painting part and not so much worrying about will this color look good next to this one, and I can just zone out and paint. So I like to start with the lightest color in my palette because if I mess up, I have another chance to clean it up with the darker colors to cover up the mistakes easier. In this case, it's this blushy peachy color that I chose for the nose. With these glazes, you want to get a good 3 coats on it because if you only do 1 coat, since the ceramics are porous, it sucks in the moisture really quickly and the pigment that is left on the surface reflects the brush strokes that you created. So to avoid any streakiness, I tried to get a really even 3 coats so there's enough on there to melt into an even color once it's fired. Plus the colors are richer with more coats too. Since this gnome ring holder is so small, I had to use a very small brush and really take my time to be careful and make sure I'm not painting on parts that I don't want painted in that color. For example, while painting the nose, I'm really careful not to get the nose color onto the beard or the hat, which was very challenging, but at the same time it was really nice to be able to zone out and really focus and take my time and watch YouTube or listen to podcasts and just mindlessly paint for hours. That being said, this project did take me multiple long sessions, so most of this video will be sped up. I'm just leaving some clips here and there so you can really see that there was no rushing on this one. Something that I like to do in my ceramic projects is I take a really long skinny brush and go around the perimeter of the part that I want that color and then go back with a larger brush to fill in the larger areas inside the perimeter that I just painted. I think this is helpful because it makes sure I'm getting each coat and going around 3 times, but also I can slow down and focus on where the details need to be and then just take advantage of that bigger brush for the larger areas. Plus, if I use a small brush on a large area, it's harder to spread it out for an even coat than if you just use the appropriate size brush. Since the back of the gnome is still a pretty narrow area, I just stuck with the fine brush out of laziness more than anything. Once I started painting the beard and the base, you'll see me switching brushes, which was very helpful. As a side note, in the description of my videos, there's always links to any supplies and materials that I use in the video, so check those out if you're interested to see exactly what I'm using, or if you want to try them out for yourself. For this video, I got the ceramic and the paints from Color Me Mine and their to-go kits, but go to your local Color Me Mine so you can make your own gnome ring holder. I don't really wear rings, but I do have a lot of hair ties that I lose all the time, so it'd be nice to have one spot to keep them, or at least some place to try and keep them in the same spot. Anyway, back to starting with the lighter colors to make fixing mistakes easier. You can also just use a wet cotton swab to wipe away any paint that you don't want. I somehow got light purple paint on the tip of the hat somehow, which was probably on my hands, I don't really know, but I just used a wet Q-tip and it came off really easily. The quote-unquote paint that I'm working with here is really just a diluted clay with pigment in it, and I think it's actually called an underglaze, so it's pretty easy to wash off what you don't like on the bisque, especially if it's a lighter color. It is pretty forgiving, just make sure you let the bisque dry before you paint over it, or the paint doesn't soak in as well because there's that barrier of moisture already. I like to clean up right when I notice it because it's easy to forget and cover it, and then once it's fired, it's there forever and you can't really do anything about it, and all you can do is hope that it's not noticeable or it was covered by a darker color. Another trick is to wet the Q-tip and pull off the cotton swabby bit until it's just that stick part, and use that as a more controlled point to get into those hard to reach areas. After I fixed what I could so far, I used a light brown color and started the beard and painted a thin line around the perimeter, being careful not to get too much paint on the brim of the hat, under the nose, around the boots, and on the tray. If I got a little bit on there, no big deal because I can just use that Q-tip easily like you just saw to clean it up, but it's even easier to just avoid messing up in the first place. After painting the thin line, I also try and spread out the extra paint that builds up on the sides of the brush strokes to keep a nice even coat as best as I can. After I completed going around the perimeter with the thin brush, I took a larger brush to fill in the center of the beard and then went back to outline it again and repeated to get those nice 3 solid coats. I think of each section of this little gnome guy, the beard probably took me the longest out of the whole thing. It's not even the biggest part of the piece, but because of all the sharp turns, I think that's why it just ended up taking the longest. But anyway, after getting the base color onto the beard, I moved on to the boots. For the boots, I chose a chocolatey brown color and again was careful to keep a clean curved line on the boots. And since the light purple on the back and the light brown on the beard are both lighter than this one, this dark brown color will cover it easily. So I was really able to control the shape of the boot. After filling in one boot, while I waited for it to dry, I moved on to the other boot and I worked back and forth between the two. Then that second coat on the boots was taking too long and I got kind of impatient, so I figured since I'm already working on the boots with this dark brown color, why not use it and add a little contrast to the beard? So I took my skinny brush and tried to figure out where the beard shape had little creases in it, where I could paint on a line to show some definition. The thing is, when you put those 3 coats on of the paint, sometimes you lose the shape and details of the sculpture itself under the layers once the paint dries. So I started with the main ones that I could definitely see, where there were little indents in the beard, and then added more lines wherever I felt like after that. Since this piece is so small, it's extra challenging to get those really fine lines on an already small piece, so I took extra care to get these lines down right the first time. It is hair, so I wasn't super pressured about it, and if it looked a little wobbly, that's totally fine, because again, it's hair. I didn't want the beard lines to touch into the boots though, because it is the same color, so I tried to border it but not touch it, so you could still tell the difference between the boot and the hair. I think painting these lines on the beard was my favorite part because I was able to just freehand it and add lines where I felt like. That being said, say you did paint on a line that you don't like, or maybe one of the lines that you made was a little too crooked to your liking and you wanted to straighten it out for some reason, that's when I would take a toothpick and once the line that I didn't like dried completely, I would gently scratch off the line and kind of shape it to how you wanted it or scratch it off completely. But when you're doing that, you have to make sure that you don't scratch into the light brown underneath it. You're just trying to scratch off the surface where that line that you don't like has been painted, if that makes sense. You can also use the wet Q-tip method, but then you might wipe off the layer that you painted underneath it on accident. And since one line is pretty minor, a toothpick would be the best option in my opinion. So that's a little tip if you do find yourself in a situation where you want to clean it up a little bit. By the time I did 3 coats on all of the beard lines, the boots were dry and I added the final coat onto them. After that, I was back to cleaning up some of the dark brown from the hat using a wet Q-tip. Sometimes it takes a couple clean swabs to get it all the way off, but then it's like nothing happened. Another tip that I use is to rotate the Q-tip, so you are using a clean side on the piece at all times and kind of spin the paints off of the ceramic. It's kind of hard to explain, but hopefully you'll see in the video. There was a stubborn little bit of dark brown paint on the base, so I tried to use a wet cotton swab stick to get at it, but it was just really in there, so I just decided to clean up what I could reach for now. Then I moved on to painting the hat, which is a specialty glaze, and I don't think I mentioned in this video, but all the glazes or paints that I'm using right now on the ceramic will completely change once the ceramic is fired in the kiln, and it will all come together in the end, so stick around for that reveal. That being said, right now this glaze looks like a burgundy kind of color, but once it's fired it will be more purple with a bit of brown in it, and I guess you'll just have to wait and see. I decided to leave the little brim section on the hat to put a darker purple there to break it up a bit and to have a little bit of a buffer for that specialty glaze to bleed onto. Once I got 3 even coats on the hat, I moved on to the brim of the hat and I chose a really deep dark purple color. Right now it looks kind of like a berry or plummy kind of color, but it will be a really deep purple once it's fired. You'll just have to trust me until the reveal. I was trying my best not to get the purple onto the back of the gnome or onto the nose, but since the purple fires so dark, it will easily cover the light pinky color on the nose that I couldn't clean up under the brim of the hat, so it all works out. It was kind of challenging to see under the brim of the hat on the back though, since the lip of the base is kind of raised up a little bit on the ring holder, and it was a little bit in the way, so even if I tilted it up, it was kind of hard and annoying, and it was a bit of a blind spot, but at a certain point I just gave up trying so hard and just accepted that I would have to clean it up with a toothpick later. So after I got all 3 coats on the brim of the hat, I took the toothpick and just started chiseling away, hoping I wasn't cutting into the light purple on the back of the gnome. I like to try and use one of my bigger and fluffier detail brushes to swipe away any of the crumbs that I created after scratching off the dark purple. I try to do that to minimize the dusty paint flying around my workspace, but at a certain point I just started blowing them away because it's faster and more convenient. Then I figured, since I'm at it with the toothpicks, let me scrape what I can off of the base with it, since it was so stubborn earlier with the Q-tips. The boots and under the beard were especially hard to not get paint on, and it's areas like this that I don't try super hard while painting, and I just clean it up later. It's a lot of work, but it's so worth it in the end, and it's little stuff like that that can drive me crazy if I leave it and it goes fired onto the piece forever. Now that the gnome is completely painted, it's time to work on the base. So I took a medium shade of purple, and with my skinny brush, I kind of do a couple swipes outside to shape the brush a little, and then swipe under the beard to get a really crispy line under there. If I went right under the beard right away with all the paint on the brush, it would definitely get onto the beard for sure. So I try to swipe a little bit off right outside first, and then fill in that little crease with the excess paint on the brush, and then even it out to make it a nice, even layer. So I continue this around the whole gnome, and then take my bigger brush and fill in the larger parts of the base. Don't forget, I gotta do this whole thing 3 times, and by now I think I took a break for dinner. And by then I think it was dark already, so you could really tell I got them studio lights on really bright. I went around and around and around and around, then I flipped it over and went around again on the underside of the lip of the base, and then on the base with that same purple. It was quite repetitive, but hey, you need those 3 coats, so you gotta do what you gotta do. This is also where I wish I had a bit of a bigger brush, because doing so many small strokes and then trying to spread it out to make it even just took so long, and it would be a lot easier with like a fan brush or even a wider brush in general for this area. But I worked with what I had, and here we are. So for the design on the base, I couldn't just leave it plain, I had to be extra, and I figured since it's a circle, I'm gonna draw a mandala on it, because why keep things simple when you can just make it complicated? So I actually used the tube that my detail brushes came in to draw a circle around the base, and then used it as a guide to draw the mandala. I basically just eyeballed everything, so it's not perfect, but it's fine. It's just gonna be holding my hair ties, I'm not that worried about it. I used pencil again to do some of the planning, because again, the pencil will burn off and you won't see any of it except for the paint that I put on. So then I took my detail paint writer bottle thing with that same dark purple in it that I used for the brim of the hat to draw the lines of the mandala onto the base. These detail bottles are so nice because you just draw it on once, and since the paint comes out in thick amounts, you only need to do it once and that's enough coats for it. So instead of spending hours with my little dainty baby paintbrush having to go over the whole thing 3 times like the beard lines, I just had to draw it on once and that's done. Since there is that gnome in the middle, it was a little bit tricky and there was a lot of spinning to see the other side, and the lines that I painted on the base aren't perfect, but at this point I've spent hours on this little thing and it's for my hair ties, so I'm just not that bothered. Plus I wanted to get it done before I went into Color Me Mine later that night so that I could drop it off to be fired. If I wanted to clean up the lines, it is pretty easy, like I mentioned with the beard lines. Since there's that base layer of that lighter purple underneath, I could easily just let that dark purple dry completely and then use a toothpick to scratch off the parts that I don't like. But like I said, I'm not bothered. So here's the whole thing freshly painted before it meets its fate in the kiln to be fired. It's such a cute little project that I took way too seriously, but let me tell you, I'm so excited to see how it looks after it's fired. So enjoy this for a little bit because the moment of truth is coming up. And 3, 2, 1... Bam! This is the final look after it's made it through the whole firing process. I'm so happy with it and I just love the color palette, and it's not perfect, but it is art and it'll fit in perfectly with my dragon and my other gnome mug. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like and subscribe for more art and animal related content. This video doesn't really have any animals in it, so I'll show you a picture of my doggy dressed up as a bumblebee from Halloween to make up for it. You're welcome. Anyway, if you made it this far, comment and and let me know if you've ever painted ceramics and what you think about this cute DIY hair tie holder that's also a little gnome. I respond to all of your comments and you all seriously make my day, so let's chat in the comments. Also, comments help my engagement on the video, which then allows YouTube to show my video for more people to see. And even a simple like and share really help a lot. Check out my Instagram where I will be posting a reel showing the process too. And if I can find the same sound, I'll post one on TikTok as well. All of my socials are in the description as always. And thank you guys so much for watching. Stay creative and I'll see you in next Friday's video.